Here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Servant Aftershow presented by the Hollywood Critics Association. My name is Heather Wixson, and we are here this week to talk about episode 8 of Servant entitled Donut. I am joined by my co-host, Rick Hong, and
Hello.
and we are rejoined by Kiyra Lynn. Hi, Kiyra.
Hi, guys.
So we are getting into the thick of it, you guys. I don't know how you felt by the end of this episode, but I think Leanne is taking some very, very dark turns. I don't know how you all are feeling about that.
Kiyra, you go.
You know what? I love it. And I'm not surprised by it. You know what? I was kind of waiting for her to go a little cuckoo because everyone in this show is a little cuckoo. But now it's like Leanne is letting her cuckoo show, and I'm here for it.
How about for you, Rick?
Yeah, no, it's like I was saying in the last episode, I think, where, now that we're on the back half of this season, the roller coaster ride is going, and it is going. I mean, there is the twills, there's going upside down, the twists and turns. And the most interesting thing that we learned, I think, in the last episode is how quickly Leanne could use her powers to work. Like, it wasn't a distance thing. It didn't need any time, how fast it could work. And in this situation, I mean, from a way distance, whether she was up close last week with just being on the porch with Jericho, this week, she's not even probably who knows how many miles and miles away she is for this one. And her powers definitely extend and expand and go far. And so it was incredible to see, and her vengeance.
I know it's so interesting because so this episode, we get a little bit more of Isabelle than we've seen throughout the rest of this season. And there's a part in the beginning where you kind of like her a little bit because she feels like she's trying to really relate to Leanne. We get a sense of her actual long-term relationship with Dorothy a bit. But then ultimately we realize that it's all BS. Basically, it's because, she knows that there's something up with Dorothy, and, clearly she wants to try to figure out what exactly happened to Jericho, and she wants to ruin Dorothy over it. And boy, does she pay the ultimate price for it. I'm curious for you guys, part of me obviously feels bad for Isabelle because that was just a horrific way to go. But ultimately, maybe you don't try to manipulate the nanny who has superpowers because you reap what you sow.
I think with all the characters, I think with all the characters, there's this, you have a tendency to, you want to feel for them, but then on the flip side, there's always this darkness. And I think that's with all of the characters. So I'm not surprised with Isabelle that this came up, but something I was laughing at because, a couple of weeks back, Heather, you were like, well, if Jericho had died, wouldn't there be some documentation in regards to his death? And I was like, boom, there you go. Here, she's bringing it to the table. I liked seeing the backstory and hearing that Dorothy, the treatment of Dorothy towards Leanne is sort of like this weird manipulation and sort of grooming thing that Dorothy has going on with whoever may be sitting in that seat, and that sort of relationship. So I found that really interesting. Obviously, to give everything away, I was not expecting for her to take a bullet through the back of the head. But hey, if you're going to go on Servant, I guess that's a good way to go.
You know what they say, okay, when it comes to Isabelle, what they say in the news? I mean, if it bleeds, it leads. So clearly here, she wanted to be front and center of the story, and man, she bled for that, same thing, that was kind of that was definitely a shocker to see, just the real wrath, but at the same time, and, we're on episode 8 and we saw the buildup. If you kind of, if Leanne kind of doesn't like you, then certain things are going to happen to you. Like with Toby's girlfriend losing her finger. We never, I guess, thought we would get to the point of where Leanne would actually cause somebody's death regardless of, whether she felt slighted or not. So I think that's what like the big like shocker for all of us was, if it was someone from the cult, her past or something, her defending herself, could definitely see that. Could definitely see her power or whatever. But in this, it's Heather. It's like you said last episode too. Is she becoming the villain?
Yeah.
And, to see her do this thing to kind of this outside person, like Isabelle's like not someone that's like in their lives all the time, not in their house all the time. So, and, we've all come across that person that we've met that we've thought was going to be our friend. And then we found out that, we've been slightly used, and we may have not been happy about it, but clearly, we wouldn't use our own, telepathic powers to have them shot through the back.
And the most shocking part of that whole sequence too is the look on Leanne's face when it happens, because that's like the first time where you've seen her sort of take pleasure in what she does. Like we, with the seagull thing, like she kind of was just talking to Dorothy and she was just like, oh, that's interesting. And she was pretty horrified by what happened to Dorothy, on camera, even though she was the one who manipulated that whole situation. But this one, she was like, I was waiting for her to start cackling like she was like a witch or something. Like she was genuinely pleased. And the look on Dorothy's face really, I think, was all of us, where we were like, oh snap, like this is Leanne coming into a very dark phase. So I think, based on where we're headed, like I'm pretty nervous for everybody involved with this show, because I'm like, if Leanne keeps going unchecked, like what does that mean for everybody? Because that's kind of terrifying now.
Absolutely. It's funny because it was interesting to see Leanne's manipulation of Isabelle. How it was, you see her, Isabelle, running through the park, and Leanne sees her, and then all of a sudden she starts to cry, and at first I was like, what is going on? And then it was like her luring Isabelle to come closer, knowing that, believe we all know that Isabelle's intentions were always bad towards Dorothy, but I feel like this is Leanne's sort of back into Dorothy's good graces. I don't exactly know in what way, but or is Dorothy still going to be kind of put on the outs? I don't know. What do you guys think? Because I'm a little confused in regards to where Leanne is holding Dorothy, because we all know that Dorothy at this point is completely pissed at Leanne, but like where does Leanne hold Dorothy right now? Obviously she's close to Sean, but does she like Dorothy? Does she not like Dorothy? I'm not so entirely sure. What do you guys think?
For me, she definitely, like, she loves that family. She loves, like, Dorothy's almost like that person where Leanne's like the person that's trying too hard, or like that, that just wants some version of love or approval, whether it's, it's because she first kind of just started out as the employer, but then she gifted them a baby to have their lives back. And, now she's in that house, and like they even kind of gave her free reign for a little bit in between season 2 and 3 as we enter 3, where, she's just kind of like, they're bad people out there. So everybody's kind of like going to Leanne to say, is this okay? Is that okay? And so I feel like it's still like an approval thing, or it's like she's just constantly saying like, Dorothy, don't fight me. I love you. Yeah. But every time you do something to fight me, to resist me or something, it's on you. It's not me. Type. So that's the way that I view that relationship. Okay. Like all Leanne really wants is the love and the approval from Dorothy. But Dorothy is, as we've seen in 1 and 2 and this season, she's for good reason too. She's got her quirks and her things. And I think she is her own worst enemy towards Leanne.
Yeah.
I think
I was going to say there's that interesting sort of back and forth that happens in the kitchen early on in the episode, where Leanne tries to talk about there being 2 stars in the house, and you can see her kind of look at Dorothy, where she's trying to get Dorothy's like feeling like, oh, this girl's on my side, and Dorothy just shuts it down like immediately. So I think there is like a genuine sense of affection, but I think Leanne is becoming more and more aware of just how capable she is in the things that she can do. And I think she's struggling with that. I think that there is somebody who genuinely wants to feel like she's part of a family, but also knows the power that she wields and what she could do to that family if they don't reciprocate, the love that she wants to share with them. So it's interesting because I think it's this whole new dynamic to Leanne that we haven't seen pretty much up until this point, where, for most of season 1 and 2 and the first half of season 3, like, we really like Leanne. And now I'm like, I don't know. I would be terrified of this girl. And I think the way Lauren Ambrose is playing it, like, there's just some really great subtleties, like where, we don't see her in a single moment in this entire episode without Jericho baby Bjorned to her chest. Like, she is not letting go of Jericho. The baby's like now in the bedroom with them. He doesn't even have his own room now. And just seeing how far Dorothy, like how far she's gone in all of this is really sad in a lot of ways, because she's been through a lot. But, I'm curious to see, because we saw her fumbling with her day planner again, just how close we're going to get to her making that realization of like, oh my God, like, is that going to end up being a good thing? Is it going to be a bad thing? I don't know. I genuinely don't know when that we get to that moment. And I'm sure we're going to get to it at some point, whether it's not this season or but it'll be next. But like, there's going to be a moment where Dorothy has her reckoning. And I'm not even sure how that's going to play out now. I kind of thought early on in season 3 where I thought it might go. And now I'm like, oh no, this is a totally different ball game than I think we were playing at the beginning of this season.
Let's keep in mind. Go ahead, Kiyra. Go ahead.
I think that if anybody actually ends up guessing, like, what will happen in Servant, like if somebody randomly guesses, how this is all going to unfold, that must be like a billion to one sort of like percentage of being able to guess it, because the writers and they are fantastic at keeping us guessing. Go ahead, Rick.
No, so I mean, the way that I looked at Leanne too is, she's, like, especially seeing this episode, she's getting more of that, because everybody else, like, like the people outside the house look up to her and everything. So it's like she's almost getting like a God complex on her own. Mm-hmm. I have this following, I have my followers, or like whatever else it is. So like, I think that also kind of just contributes to kind of the, Leanne kind of unwielding whatever, because she probably felt, and she even tells them too, like, we've been suppressed. And so, or like, to a degree, it's just like, like they've all kind of been suppressed. That's why like they're following her around, and same thing for her, is like they've all been suppressed. So now here's this thing where, she realizes that she can kind of just unwield her powers at will.
Yeah. Do you think that in some ways it almost recontextualizes, like, the things that we've seen in episode 7 and 8 specifically? Do you think that recontextualizes in a way everything we believed about Leanne's involvement with the cult prior to where we see her in the show? Because I think, do you think that they were aware of how the dark path that she could go on?
Yes.
Because I think there's something interesting about that, because we see her, coming to this meeting with the homeless folks living in the park. She brings lemonade and coffee, and she's like preaching to them, and there's these balloons, and there's clearly like this power dynamic now where she is this, this holy figure to them. And maybe there was something to keeping Leanne a little bit on a leash, because Unleash Leanne is pretty terrifying, I think, overall.
Well, I think that when Uncle George was still around, and he died in season 2, correct? Yeah, I think, was it season 2? I believe that, he kind of had that, he was warning them. I think that they, all the way back when, Uncle George and Aunt May were still in the picture, I think they were very aware of what she was capable of, and which is one of the big reasons why they were like, she needs to come back. Like, you don't understand, she wasn't supposed to be here. Jericho was not supposed to be here. Leanne's purpose is to be with, somebody else. So I think, to answer your question, I think they were very aware of what she's capable of. We're just it's all unraveling for us to see what she can do with those powers and how far away she can actually control them.
Yeah, I want to.
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's funny. No, because like Kiyra was like talking about George and then Aunt May, and I was like, oh, I know who you mean. You're thinking Spider-Man, but like we're thinking about Aunt Josephine. You imagine Aunt Josephine, but it's just like, no. Yeah, but you're saying it like.
There was Aunt Josephine, the one whose body is still in the in the wall. But there was Aunt May and Uncle George were the first two that came through.
Yes, I think that was. She was in
right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. It's just like I'm in Spider-Man mode, right? It's like Aunt May. I was just like Spider-Man. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Exactly. So that's where my mind's at.
Both Aunt Mays. Rest in peace, both Aunt Mays.
Right.
In terms of speaking about Leanne's manipulation, I'm curious how you guys feel about her treatment of Julian, because it's interesting the dynamic of them between, like, again, in the first like 6 or so episodes. But I'm actually, the more that I'm watching them now, the more I'm a little bit disturbed, especially in this episode, because it's almost like Julian doesn't have control of his body. And it's almost, honestly, like, and I don't mean to be too dark or deep about this, but it's almost like a rape scenario in a lot of ways, because he obviously can't say no to her. He obviously can't consent the way that he would want to. So is she crossing this really terrible line in a way that we hadn't seen her do it for? Because we see the thing where, like, she's like, no, come to my bedroom, or the scene with the milk too, where he's just pouring it because she is just has that hold on him. And I'm like, I love Julian, and I think I'm actually genuinely sad for the things that he's going through with her in this way. Like, I get it. It's kind of a fun little dalliance, but I think it's actually kind of terrifying now.
I'm not too sure. I see a very, obviously it's a very sexual relationship between the two of them. She is demonstrating like dominatrix type behavior towards him. So I feel that, and him being the submissive. So I feel that that's the type of relationship that they may have. And how that, I don't know how long, maybe I missed this, but for me, this seems to be like the first time they've actually were having sex since he's been dating Vera. Am I right? Did I miss something?
I think
it's almost like Vera and him are on the outs anyway. So
right, we all knew that.
But they've alluded to it though, because like they're, I believe that there was like a discussion about it to a certain point, because like I think that Dorothy had been suspecting that something had been going on with them, because we saw like in the last episode where she was kind of watching them, and I think she knows that there's something going on. And I don't know if it's been super explicit for us as viewers, but there's clearly something.
Well, we've always known that Julian has had this attraction to her, like throughout this season, even though he's been with Vera, but it feels like Vera was kind of like a patch, maybe even a distraction for him to kind of stay away from Leanne, because I know he feels that whether or not this has changed, I'm not sure, but we've always known that he felt like his sexual relationship with Leanne was not healthy or not good, but how that dynamic, like how he's gone into this dynamic, I mean, whether or not, I'm not too sure if it's consensual or not.
Because I'm just curious, because we know how she can manipulate people. Like, does Julian actually have feelings for her, or is this relationship happening because Leanne is willing it to happen? So that to me is kind of like, because we know what kind of hold she has. So, right. And again, that milk scene specifically was just like, oh my God, like we were going, and then he drinks it afterwards, which is even like so much milk.
Well, the funny thing, and it's kind of a cool way that they did that scene, just in terms of shooting it and just seeing like the milk all over the place, is that I think it's funny that he continues to drink the milk or goes to continue like that full glass of milk, but yet nobody tries to clean up this spilled milk at all. There's no gestures, not from Dorothy, not from Leanne, not from him. It's like on the table, it's on the floor, dropping down, and he's just like, I'm just gonna drink the milk. Most people would be like, oh crap, like drink the milk, drop it, try to clean it up. Instead, he's just going to drink all the milk first.
Yeah. I really like, there's a sequence that happens when Leanne is listening to the music and Sean kind of comes up there and starts talking to her and kind of opens up to her. And it's a real sentence because we get a sense, obviously, that Dorothy and Sean's relationship is not in a great place. He's sleeping on the couch in his little office. They're very separate. She won't even let him be affectionate towards her. Like there's a scene when he like tries to kiss her and Jericho before leaving, and she kind of moves, and so he just kisses the baby. But I thought it was interesting because there's this sort of part of the dialogue that he says where he said, before I met Dorothy, I wasn't lonely. I was alone a lot, but I was never lonely. And now all he feels like is that he feels lonely. And I think that's just such a profoundly sad statement when you're in a relationship and you're supposed to be, you're in a situation now where like everything's supposed to be good. You've got a hit TV show, you've got a wife, your kid is back, everything should feel like it's gelling, and nothing is working in Sean's life. Like it's pretty terrible for him.
But I feel like Sean's suffering, he's actively contributed to this, like it is sad. It was nice to get in the video promo of his reality show, his backstory, that, what happened with his parents and that he was homeless and that he found food that kind of saved him. And then it kind of clicked with him wanting to feed the homeless in the park. So that was a nice little connection. But he and Julian made this decision to do this manipulation of Dorothy. So, if he's suffering right now, even though things on the outside, you would think with all of these wonderful things going on, if he's suffering, I feel like it's deserving. Like he deserves this because, eventually Dorothy will wake up and realize the reason why, that month is empty in regards to her documenting, all of Jericho's firsts. And then I was wondering, and what did you guys think about this? She's looking at like baby photos of Jericho. I'm like, does actual Jericho look like, baby photos actually look like current Jericho? Like, obviously there's supposed to be two different kids, but would she be able to put two and two together like that? Or did Leanne make such a baby that looks exactly like the original, now deceased Jericho? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, well, the thing about Sean first is that I think the whole thing for him is like when he's talking about the loneliness is that like when he was by himself, he only had to think about himself. So that's why he was like saying, he's like, I only need to think about me. So at that stage in his life or whatever, so he didn't like worry too much about like in terms of like the loneliness part. And then what loneliness here means, it's like, it's just the balance. Now he has to think about not only himself, but this, his baby Jericho. He's got to think about Dorothy. He's got to think about Leanne and the people around. And, and although like he's got the family together, he doesn't have the balance, and the people around him aren't happy. So I can see why he's like saying, he's like, I feel lonely, because it's like he has no control over anybody else's happiness. And again, and because of that, he's not happy. So, and then when it comes to the baby, it's like the power of Leanne. It's like, I imagine that it looks like, I imagine it's Jericho, and like in any form, it's Jericho other than Scary Jerry, the plastic baby.
Oh, Scary Jerry.
Scary Jerry. I love that Scary Jerry made a comeback. When I saw him in the last episode, I was all, yes, he's back.
I
but Kiyra, so I mean, so were you shocked to see that scary, like the baby plastic baby Jericho showed up again? Because all season long we've been, we've had like just what we talked about last episode, but all season long, we thought we were kind of in the safe with Jericho the baby. Like I was telling the cast early in the junkets that he's like a series regular. So were you surprised to see, like plastic baby Jericho show up again?
Not necessarily, because at this point, we saw Leanne switch out real Jericho for scary Jerry when Julian was babysitting him. Maybe it was season 2, so we knew that she was capable of doing that and it was while she was going bowling. Right. So I kind of had a feeling if there was going to be something huge that was going to happen, if when Dorothy sent her away in episode 10. And so it being that, wasn't surprised, but I kind of like scary Jerry. So
yeah, I mean, I will say, like, it doesn't shock me in the way, like, obviously Leanne can wield her power, do whatever she wants, but I will say, like, the sight of it again and the way that it was being held, like, I gasped. I was like, oh my God. Like, it was just like such a great moment of where it was like, oh, holy crap, we're playing this, we're doing this again. And then cutting to like the baby cries throughout the house and all these different places. Like, that sequence was just phenomenal. I really, really love that. So
I want to ask you guys.
Ask.
I want to ask you guys about when Isabelle is killed, and it's on the newscast. What do you feel? Do you feel that Dorothy catching that glimpse of Leanne was intentional? Did Dorothy do you feel like that was intentional, that Leanne wanted to have Dorothy see her have this sort of evil, visceral reaction to that? Or do you think it was supposed to be like kind of caught off guard?
I think it was intentional, but I think it was working on two different levels. I think the one level was, I think she wanted Dorothy to be aware of like, hey, I can do these kind of things. But I think also because Leanne knowing what Isabel's plan was, Dorothy didn't. Dorothy thought when Isabelle confronted her that it was about the way that Leanne was mistreated during season 2. Where we all know that it was actually Isabelle wanting to talk about the baby dying and that Dorothy being at fault. So I think it was almost in two levels where like Leanne, I think ultimately was doing it as a way to continue to protect the family. I think there was a genuine note of concern on her part where she's like, I need to make sure this doesn't happen because I'm trying to protect Dorothy. But I think also there is a part of her that wants to show Dorothy, like, guess what? You thought I could do things when you tried to send me away. Look what happens when somebody, gets in your way. Because even like Dorothy makes the mention of like how the other guy was supposed to do it and he had the flu. And then as soon as the gunfire starts, she's like, oh, of course she's there when this is happening. So I think it was almost like a layered thing where I definitely think, Leanne was looking for Dorothy's acknowledgement, but I think Leanne's intentions were sort of working in a few different ways. If that makes sense.
And if you get Isabelle out of the way in that sense too, I mean, it kind of like we talked about at the beginning of the episode where she says, we have 2 stars in the house. It kind of gives you it's a kind of an easy way to like get rid of somebody. And then all of a sudden it's like maybe like try to pave the way for Dorothy to get back to like working in the status that she was if she felt threatened by Isabelle. And also just kind of like a nugget of Leanne saying, see, now I'm giving you your position back, or like that obstacle you think was there is no longer there for you.
Yeah.
But then I'm wondering how Leanne is going to get back into Dorothy's good graces. You know what I mean? Now that Dorothy feels that she's putting Jericho in danger by taking him to the park. Like I'm wondering, I wonder how they're going to patch that up. Sorry, Heather, go on.
Oh no, that's okay. It's interesting because Leanne, again, her character is an 18-year-old girl. So she's reacting to a lot of things very much like a teenager would, where, you know, Dorothy has years on her. She's got sort of wisdom and, you know, for better, for worse. So the way that like Dorothy would handle a situation is very different than the way Leanne would handle it. You know, is it better or worse? Who's to tell? But I will say, if I was Dorothy's neighbor who was gossiping about Dorothy's unfortunate scenario, like, in the fact that Leanne's seen it, maybe I'd go on vacation for a while just to avoid any potential wrath, because it's, you know, I don't know if it's a good thing to gossip about Dorothy these days, because I think Leanne's pretty hip to that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's one of those, again, it's like, what I love about this show is that it's like these things that should be so horrible, like, you know, obviously a woman getting shot in the head during live news, like, oh my God, that is terrible. But yet there's a part of me that was just like, okay, well, good. At least we're not going to have to put Dorothy through all this stuff in a way that, you know, she needs to reconcile with it, but not in that way. Like, that's not the way to do that. And I think it shows the character of who Isabelle was, is that instead of like trying to go to Dorothy and talk to her about it, that she was going to make a news item out of it, you know, which is really a crappy thing to do, regardless of how you feel about your coworker. Like, you know, I've worked with people in my career that maybe I didn't necessarily like, but I would never, you know, have done that. You know, thankfully I work at a site now where we all like actually like each other. So, you know, thankfully, I was gonna say, I don't know about you two, because I know you two work together.
I mean, but like, to answer your question, Kiyra, at this stage, it's like, I don't know how Dorothy and Leanne actually repair that, because it's only becoming more evident that, you know, whatever Dorothy does, it only irritates, or sorry, whatever Leanne does just irritates Dorothy even more. So, you know, like and so at this stage, especially as like we're kind of like winding down, you know, like, I don't know, you know, like that's where I'm like, I don't know if that relationship is, you know, fixable. And then because of that, I don't know what that means when we get to the finale of you know, because like, I mean, the ultimate goal, I think, for at least for Dorothy is just to kick Leanne out of the house. And the scary thing for us as audience members is Leanne actually doing something to the Isabelle effect to Dorothy. But then that would also kind of screw up a season 4 if you kill off Dorothy before we go into season 4. And then, like, I don't know if you'd have much of a season 4. So that's the only thing. It's just that it's more just like, yeah, Kiyra, it's like, I don't see that relationship repairable. But if, you know, or to see like how it can be repaired is I think like why we keep watching.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting moment in this episode when Dorothy just lashes out at Leanne, and she basically says something to her to the effect of like, you are never going to touch Jericho again. And I felt like in that moment, I was like, oh boy, you've done it. Like, you can't tell Leanne, you can't speak to Leanne in absolutes, because as soon as somebody does that, that is a bad thing.
Yes.
And I feel like them like, oh, I think Dorothy, you just made the wrong move. Because I think, you know, obviously Leanne was conscientious of Dorothy's issues with her, but I think once you sort of come out and say something like that, that is a line that has now officially been crossed, and I don't know how you come back from that. So I think the next couple of episodes of this season are going to be really interesting. But I think huge credit to Nell Tiger Free and Lauren Ambrose. Like, I love seeing them come together and like having a camaraderie in the early part of the season, but them sort of going back and forth a little bit in this latter half has been very interesting as well. So,
totally agree.
Yeah. So I kind of feel like I think this sort of takes us to the end of this episode. Like, usually we do some sort of predictions, but honestly, at this point, it's like, I don't even know. Like, I know Leanne is getting more powerful. She's definitely going down a dark path. I'm nervous about where that's going to go. But I don't think it's going to be anywhere good, is basically what I'm feeling. I don't know how you guys are feeling.
Yeah, I just don't know how the household is going to work, because, at least in the beginning of the season, we saw that although Leanne was on edge, the house was at peace on some end. And now the household is back into, kind of like what we've had in each season. It's like it's back in disarray. So now, and then now that Leanne is kind of gotten more powerful or shown us, more of her tricks, it's just like how do you end this season for us?
Right. Well, I find either way, I'm sure what happens will be surprising, and none of us will have guessed what the outcome will be for the finale. This is episode 8, so there's only 2 more episodes left.
Yeah.
And Kieran, and we're hoping that we can get you back. We're hoping we can get Shannon and Kit back as well, so we can all kind of discuss that, like however crazy this finale gets. Or maybe the big twist is that they announced that there's a season 4, that season 4 is the end. And what we'll find is that the big twist at the end of this is that it was only 3 seasons.
Oh, that would be so terrible. I don't feel like we could really wrap all this up in 2 more episodes, especially when they're only like 30 minutes. Like, I feel like we need at least another 5 hours of this story to really bring everything full circle.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I guess it would be just a little bit over an hour if you put the last 2 things together. So it'd be like, how do you do that? How do you finish a series in an hour when you've had all this buildup?
Yeah, and especially with the amount of things that are happening in this show. But yeah, so I think that kind of takes us to the end of episode 8. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please, be sure to comment and let us know your thoughts, especially as we get closer to this finale. I feel like we should go through and read some of the viewer comments once we get to the final episode and see just how far all of us were in terms of whether we were on track with where everything heads, if we were completely off base. I think regardless, I think it's going to be a really fun one to dig into. So thank you, Kiyra, for coming back. Where can everybody find you online?
You can, on social media, you can find me at Kiyra Lynn, and it's spelled like that down there, or you can check us out. We've got a wonderful website at hollywoodfirstlook.com, and you can check out both Rick and I. All of our segments and wonderful things are all on that website.
And you guys, you guys can find me on all social media at Rick Kong. And don't forget, Kiyra actually does have interviews with Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz for The Batman. So go check that out for sure.
So jealous.
They're up right now.
That's awesome. I'm so jealous. That's amazing. Congrats.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So, and you can find me on Twitter over at The Horror Chick, as well as over on dailydead.com and fangoria.com. And also, if you're into that kind of thing, the Fangoria spring issue, you can pre-order it right now, where you'll find my in-depth interview with Ty West as we dig into his return to horror, which is X, that comes out later this month already. Jeez, I can't believe we're so far into March already.
I know,
but
it's nuts.
I don't understand. I'm like, it's just been such a crazy year so far. But thank you guys so much for watching, and please make sure to tune in next week, as we will be diving into episode 9 and getting ready for the big finale. But thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you then.